What drives you, Exile? Is it justice? Revenge? Honor? No. It is power. Your limits will be tested. Break them. Do what is thought impossible, and the Atlas will follow.
Path of Exile, Echoes of the Atlas is a new endgame expansion focused around bossing and area control. And to be successful in this expansion, we're going to require builds that excel in these two areas. And in the Challenge League, we're going to be locked into a small arena forced to fight wave upon wave of nasty and difficult enemies. So chances are for this, we're going to require builds that aren't so much focused on clear speed and are more focused on being able to handle small areas of bosses or powerful enemies. My goal is to provide you all 5 powerful builds that will be able to handle both the expansion and the Challenge League with ease. These are going to include full path of buildings, which will be in the description, that include notes about leveling, information about the characters, multiple leveling trees, multiple gear sets, and they should have everything that you need to have a successful league start. And the build that we're going to be talking about today is Poison Blade Vortex Assassin. Now I know what you're thinking. Assassin did suffer some nerfs, however, they are not game-breaking by any means whatsoever. Our build lost maybe 8 to 10% of its damage, and it already had so much to begin with that it isn't going to be a problem whatsoever. If Poison Blade Vortex is your preferred league starter, this is going to be perfectly fine, you'll have no issues whatsoever. This is a poison build. Poison does damage over time and stacks up almost infinitely. So we need to stack up lots of poison duration, which is going to allow us to have more poisons on the target at one time. This build can reach upwards of 8 to 10 million DPS without too insane of gear. And yes, that's even after the nerfs. This is an excellent clear build and it is pretty strong for bosses as well. You can get some serious DPS going on this build. Now speaking of the Ascendancy, we did get some nerfs to this build. However, it's not as big of a deal as you might think. This build lost roughly maybe 8 to 10% of its damage, and we lost 20% movement speed. However, we did gain some elusive effect, which means that we're going to gain back some of that movement speed quite easily. So overall, we lost a little bit of movement speed, and we lost a little bit of damage. It's not the end of the world, and the build is still excellent. You'll be able to absolutely clear all of the content in the game with this. It's quite simple to get going. Most of the gear is very cheap, and I have updated the path of building to have a little bit better budget gear, so when you're initially beginning, you should have an easier time. One of the strengths of poison damage is how well you can stack that damage without really any investment whatsoever. This build can easily get to millions of DPS with almost no gear, and when you do invest into it, you can push this build upwards into the tens of millions of DPS at very high levels of gear, through either specific uniques or very powerful items. And with the return of Harvest, we are going to be able to get juicy explodey chests once again, just like we did before, and be able to absolutely demolish every single bit of content in the game. So now that I've given you a preview of the build, let's head into the game and get a little bit of a closer look. Hey guys, Big Ducks here, and welcome back to the channel. Now if you're enjoying my content, make sure that you like this video so that you can see more of it. Also, over 75% of you are still not subscribed to the YouTube channel. If you want to make sure that you see the latest up-to-date League Start content, make sure that you subscribe so that you can get all of these videos right in your feed. Now I do want to remind you that there is going to be a playlist up in the top right corner now that has all of my League Start content for 3.13. So if the preview of this build didn't do it for you, check out that playlist and you can maybe find something that's a little bit more suitable for what you're looking to do. Now without further ado, let's get back to the guide. Alright boys, if you've made it this far into the video, that means you're looking for a little bit more help on trying to league start with the Poison Blade Vortex Assassin. Well, we've got a couple things to talk about. One, as I said earlier in the video, this did catch some nerfs, however, the nerfs are not going to kill the build whatsoever, it's just as strong as it was before. No problems whatsoever. So as always, let's begin with the leveling section, and I do want to talk about the skills first. This build levels with Caustic Arrow and Toxic Rain. These abilities are very straightforward. You can check out my Toxic Rain Trickster video if you want some information more on how to use these two abilities. Caustic Arrow is just a simple projectile, you link it with Pierce, all of the information is in the path of building below. This is what we're going to be using for clear very early on, and then we're also going to be using Toxic Rain for single target early on. This will take us all the way up to 38, no problem whatsoever. You can use literally just a white bow with You can craft some attack speed on it maybe when you're able to. You can just try to get as fast of a bow as you can with attack speed. That's it. That's all you have to worry about. Typically early on you can use like a short bow or something like that. That should carry you all the way to 38. And when you do reach 38 is when you're going to be able to swap over to Poison Blade Vortex itself. You will need your first Ascendancy point, which is Noxious Strikes. You will use Blade Vortex, and from this point on, once you obtain Unleash, you are able to just be Poison Blade Vortex for the rest of the game, and you will have no issues whatsoever. Now, Blade Vortex is an interesting spell because what it does is it puts a swirling amount of blades around you, and when we use Unleash, you can see that we have this little 3 here on the icon here. So when you use it, it's going to actually cast 3 additional times. So if we just cast every few seconds, you'll notice that we're able to stay completely maxed out with no issues whatsoever, and we don't have to cast that often at all. It's just every like 3 to 4 seconds maybe, and that will keep our stacks at 10. Now, when you do have your stacks going, you are going to be hitting 7.5 times a second. That means 30 times in the recently window, which is the last 4 seconds. That's going to cause us to stack a ton of poison. It will allow us to stack a ton of damage, and it'll help us out quite a bit with all of the poison stuff that we've got going on with our Ascendancy here through these 2 nodes. So now beyond Blade Vortex, there is one additional skill that you're going to want to use as soon as you do swap over to Poison Blade Vortex, and that is Plague Bearer. The way that Plague Bearer works is kind of interesting. You're going to turn this ability on, and while it is on, you are going to start gaining a stacking buff. You'll see it up here in the top. It's just called Plague Bearer here. I'll have to show you more of this in the map. Actually, we can just go to a random zone right now and I can show you. So we'll go to a random zone here, and while we have Plague Bearer on, you will notice that you will be starting to stack up the buff as you do poison damage. You'll see it go up here. So as you kill enemies with poison damage specifically, that buff will begin to stack. And once it has stacked, you will be able to use the ability once again to leak out poison, and this actually does a lot of damage. You can clear almost specifically just with Plague Bearer, and it lasts for quite some time. Now it is important that you stack up to maximum, however you'll see when we get to the mapping example, you're going to stack to maximum, which for me right now is 1,000,000. You're going to be able to stack up to that instantly. It's going to be within a split second of turning it back off and on. That ability is going to help with your clear significantly. I would make sure that if you're having issues with clear, you look into making sure that you're using Plague Bearer. It's a very interesting spell. You only really need to link it with increased area of effect and Empower. I don't have Empower linked to it right now, so it could be even stronger than it is right now. And that's pretty much all that you're going to have for main abilities. There's nothing else really to it. So while you're leveling, I do want to remind you that you do need to keep on top of your resistances and your life and such. This build is essentially a melee build, so you're going to want to make sure that you have your resistances in check, your life in check. You can do that with the crafting bench here. Just make sure that you are going and grabbing these crafts early on, keeping your gear up to date, leveling and getting more life, getting more resistances, keeping your elemental resistances at 75, and trying to keep your chaos resistance above 0. As long as you make sure that you do that, you'll have a significantly easier time while leveling. If you're having issues with dying, take some more life nodes, get some more resistances, and you should be perfectly fine. This build does plenty of damage, especially once you swap over to the actual Poison Blade Vortex version, and even before that, it's quite good. So I do want to talk about the skill tree here a little bit, and to do that, we're going to jump over to Path of Building. If you don't know, Path of Building is a tool that you can use to craft your skill tree, test out your character, do all kinds of little tinkering. It's basically a character builder. It was made by one of the people at the GGG team, and it is now maintained by the community. The link for that is down in the description below. Make sure that you grab the community fork and the Pastebin so that you can load it into Path of Building, and we're going to jump over into that now. All right, so now that we're over here in Path of Building, I want you to know that there are multiple leveling trees for this build. You can come down here into the bottom left, and you'll be able to choose from the different leveling trees. So for example, for this build early on, we're going to be coming out through physical and chaos damage, grabbing some life, grabbing some damage over time, some damage nodes, some life nodes, some more life nodes, and some dodge. This build in particular does make very good use of the poison nodes from Assassin. Around the time that you're going to get Noxious Strike is around 38 is when I suggest that you do it, because you're not really going to need this until you're swapping over to Poison Blade Vortex. Now at that same time, as you are swapping over, you are going to start heading down here towards Exceptional Performance. It is important that you get skill effect duration. because when you are Blade Vortex, that skill effect duration is going to make it significantly easier for you to be able to keep your Blade Vortex up without having to cast it constantly. We're also going to grab some life over here, and that's pretty much all that we're going to do on leveling up the second portion. You can see that we are going to be grabbing Mistwalker next. This is going to give us some movement speed, and then as you continue, you can head through these skill trees here. You can see all of the points that you're supposed to take. We come up here, grab some chaos damage and life. We grab a node down here called Wind Dancer. This is going to help us with our defenses heavily, and so on and so forth. So I want you to know there are a ton of notes in here. There's a bunch of information about the build. You can find full skill setups. This is going to be for all the abilities that you can use for leveling up. It's going to be everything that you need to know. Also, there are multiple item sets. You'll see budget item sets, you will see gear, all kinds of good stuff in here. So make sure that you check it out. Make sure that you look in here for all of these different things, and there'll be pretty much everything you need to know. Now let's jump back into the game and talk about a few more things. So I do want to talk about gearing a little bit, and one good thing about this is that there is a chance that due to the nerfs, this might be a less popular build. The two builds that used these weapons, the Cold Iron Points, were the Golem builds and also Poison Blade Vortex. Both of those got some nerfs, and I feel that the community might reel a little bit, and maybe they won't be as popular as they were before. So this is honestly going to probably be cheaper. Who knows though, I might be wrong. You never really know. However, gearing on this build is quite easy. The Cold Iron Points are excellent. You can start with Obliteration Wands very early if you want. There isn't really very much required stuff for this build. Corralitos is very good. If you don't have Corralitos, you can simply just grab the node Perfect Agony here. You can use any 6-link chest piece. Eventually, if you do want to upgrade to like an Explodey chest through Harvest Crafting, you can. I have a video for that on my YouTube channel. Beyond that, we use the Embalmer just because this gives us some chaos damage, some life, some poison duration. It is quite good for the stats that it gives. It's very cheap early on. Beyond that, the Devouring Diadem is expensive early on. It almost always is. And you really aren't going to be able to get a hold of these very early. So initially, I suggest that you drop an aura or so, or use a mana flask just so that you can sustain your mana until you're able to get a hold of this. However, it is very good, and when you can get a hold of it, you should whenever the price comes down. The rest of the items are just simply random rares with life resists, and maybe some poison mods if you can find them. Like I've got Curse Enemies with Despair on Hit here. This is something that I crafted in Harvest League once again. Last thing I want to talk about with gear is that there is a cluster jewel that is very, very powerful, and it's very cheap, and you don't need to do very much to get it. It is a crit cluster jewel with only the Overwhelming Malice node. This is all that matters. This is going to give you a 10% chance again on Holy Might for 4 seconds on critical strike, and that grants 30% of physical damage as extra chaos damage. So when you do have this up, it's going to be a huge boost to damage, and we're going to be critting all the time, so this will be up pretty much constantly. Alright boys, so as always, I want to do a map. I want to show you that this build is capable of doing the highest tier content in the game. This is going to be a T16 Jungle Valley map. We've got 4 Scarabs on here, and as always, we are going to be running this with 4 Sextants. We have fire damage, lightning damage, physical damage, and poison damage taken going on this map. So this should be pretty interesting. There's going to be a bunch of extra mobs. We are going to just be running Delirium on this, and we are going to be running a Alva Temple. So we got a Piranha Scarab, a Breach Scarab, an Elder Scarab, and a Torment Scarab, and once again, T16 on Awakener 8 with 4 Sextants. So the strength of this build is the fact that you are able to move through enemies so quickly, and you don't really have to worry too much about the damage that you do. So early on, you do want to make sure that you do get stacks of your Blade Vortex going, and you want to remember that the main thing that you're going to be using to clear is actually Plague Bearer. Plague Bearer is very important for clearing because it does significant damage, especially to enemies with DR. One thing that a lot of people don't know that I've kind of been told about recently is that supposedly Plague Bearer is ignoring defenses and such. Also, this map is very dense. Supposedly Plague Bearer is ignoring defenses, and I'm actually desyncing a little bit, even though we are on lockstep. Interesting. Well, is what it is. I guess the servers are a little bit overloaded by all this stuff going on. You can kind of see me desyncing here. But yeah, so the goal of this build is you just pop on your Blade Vortex, you run around, everything pretty much just kind of melts after you stand there. If you really do need to kill something big, you can either pop down Vol Blade Vortex, you can hit your focus if you've got that for your helmet, and you just kind of run around and watch this stuff melt in front of you. Now, like I said with Plague Bearer before, you can see that we can have this going pretty much constantly and don't have to worry too much about it. It will drop down occasionally, but the moment that it drops down, it is almost instantly ready once again. You don't have any issues with that whatsoever, and I'm standing in some hands. As you know, I hate the hands. They're probably my least favorite thing about Delirium whatsoever. Let's see if we can go into this Alva Temple without dying. To be honest, Alva Temples are probably some of the more dangerous things in Delirium. These temples can be a little bit spooky. So whenever you do single target, you can just pop down Poison Blade Vortex, pop any of your cooldowns that you have, and most single target should be quite easy. The thing that you do need to know is that with single target, you really do have to stand on the enemy for a moment. You can't just like one swipe through them like most normal mobs. If you're fighting, say, like a unique mob or something like that, you are going to need to stand there for like a split second to get those poison stacking, like you'll see here. Took me about a second there to really get the damage scaling. For most normal mobs, I mean, this is a Delirium map, so they are taking significantly less damage and have a whole bunch of extra stats, but still, it should be perfectly fine. And when it comes to bossing, remember, once again, we're on a Delirium map. I don't know if this is going to last because this boss takes absolutely forever to spawn. For single target, the build does do well, but you do have to keep in mind that when you're playing this build, you can't just like run in and hit him once and sideswipe him and be done with it. When you're actually fighting the boss, you have to kind of hit him a little bit with the ability, right? Like, you got to stand in here, you got to actually stand on top of them. Unfortunately, he's got these little fire tornadoes, but you can see as the damage scales up, so that's pretty much it. That was a tier 16 Delirious map with all kinds of mods and everything on it. We'll go ahead and clear this here so we can see the terrible loot that we get. But you kind of get an idea. The build moves very quickly, although it will be getting some small nerfs to movement speed. The damage is perfectly fine, and you can see, even if we lost a little bit of damage there, we could be doing significantly more if we were using some cluster jewels, for example. If we wanted to use some like chaos damage cluster jewels or some poison cluster jewels or something like that, we could be doing significantly more damage. However, I don't have anything like that. I've literally got just one little Overwhelming Malice cluster jewel, no specialty gems or anything, nothing crazy, and I'm able to clear tier 16 Delirium maps, no problem whatsoever. So as I said, a very powerful build. Even with the nerfs, it's going to be more than fine, I promise you. You can scale more damage on this if you'd like. There are options in the path of building that you can check. So I hope that you give this build a try if you haven't for some reason at this point. This is one of my favorites of all time. Even with the nerfs, it's going to be more than fine. And that is going to be the end of the guide. Now, if you have further questions about this or any of my other builds, make sure that you join my Discord. The link is in the description down below. There is a PoE questions section that has a ton of helpful people that would be happy to help you with all of your questions. Keep in mind, during League Start, it may be quite busy, so if you do have answers to other questions, make sure that you help out other people as well. Also, if you want to catch me theory crafting some of these builds live, make sure to follow me over twitch.tv/bigducks. I'm going to be live every day all the way up till the release of the 3.13 League, and then we will be pushing pretty hard right upon League Start, so make sure that you come and hang out with your boy. So that's going to be it, guys. Thank you for watching the video. I hope that you have a wonderful League Start, and remember, if you enjoy my content, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel for more content similar to this, and stay safe out there in Raid class. And I'll see you guys in 3.13 Echoes of the Atlas.